Welcome back to the RinkMasters podcast. My name is Tyler Kroon. I am your host today. Now, I had the pleasure to sit down and talk with Fraser Rodgers, Manager of Broadcasting, Communications, and Public Relations for the Prince George Cougars. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there for this interview as I was on vacation, but Noah did a very good job with this one, and I know you guys are going to love it. Before we get this show on the road, let's head over to the Shotzies report. Cariboo Cougars alumni Jesse Pomeroy has committed to play NCAA Division I hockey with the Niagara Purple Eagles. The Prince George BC product captained the Cariboo Cats to a BC banner in 2017. He also spent the last 3 seasons in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, manning the blue line for the Drayton Valley Thunder. More Cariboo Cougar alumni news: forward Jackson Danilek will be joining the Olds Grizzlies of the Alberta Junior Hockey League. This past season, the Prince George native had a phenomenal season in the KIJHL, where he led the Sicamous Eagles in points with 57 in 43 games. Now, some Western Hockey League news. The Western Hockey League has announced this week that they have pushed back the season start date to December 4th, 2020. Previously, the tentative start date was slated to be October 2nd. And that is it for the local news. Now let's get on to the interview.
Thank you, Tyler, for that introduction. My name is Noah, and with me today is Fraser Rodgers, Manager of Broadcasting, Communications, and Public Relations for the Prince George Cougars. Thank you for coming on today, Fraser.
Hey, thanks, Noah and Tyler. Appreciate it. Really looking forward to jumping on the show.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I guess a good place to start would be for you to just explain to our listeners what exactly your role is with the Cougars. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, well, how much time do you have? Because I could talk probably for hours just on what my role is. But no, officially the Manager of Broadcasting and Media Relations, along with public relations for the team. So what that is, I do all the broadcasting, obviously on the local radio here on 94.3 The Go, then on the WHL live webcast as well, which is carried, then do all the media relations stuff for the team. So that means doing all the work with the local media outlets to conduct interviews or media requests. I write all the team issued press releases as well. So any announcements we have that goes through my desk and out to the public. Also do a lot of digital work for the team as well. So that means the website, maintaining that, updating the website, social media channels, overseeing that as well. So being one of the leads in running our Twitter and Facebook and our Instagram accounts as well. And just also on the public side is doing a lot of programs. Community, we pride ourselves on being a big community partner in Prince George. That means a lot of community work and appearances with local community groups, events, sponsorship requests outside of the rink with our players and staff. So during a hockey season, it keeps me very busy.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like that. I had forgotten actually that you did all of the broadcasting as well. So yeah. Yeah, so
yeah, that keeps you busy too.
Yeah. Now that you have a bit of a better idea of what you do, why don't you take us back to the beginning? So what led you to move into the broadcasting side of hockey?
Wow, it is going back. I'm not that old. I'm 32, but trying to go back now to when I was a teenager. It's quite a while ago. But I always had a passion for sports, like most kids, growing up. They always, gravitate towards sports. And for me, that was like a no-brainer. Loved, obviously, hockey, but not just that. Loved baseball as well, and football and soccer. Played a lot of different sports, like many kids growing up in Canada. Wasn't very good at hockey, actually. Didn't have much of a career at all. Like, I don't even have any accolades or any sort of accomplishments in hockey to even speak of, because at a young age I knew, despite the passion for it, it didn't reciprocate on the ice when it comes to actual ability to play well. So didn't really play hockey too much, but always followed it closely. But as I got into high school, getting older, in my late teenagers, I wanted to explore a way to stay in sports. If I wasn't be an elite athlete, if I'm not going to be professional or have a chance to, go farther as an athlete, how can I stay around sports? Is it either in coaching, which wasn't really a passion of mine? You know, is it working behind the scenes as some sort of athletic therapist or kinesiologist working with players when it comes to health and recovery? To me, that seems like a lot of schoolwork and a lot of dedication that way. And I didn't think that was really my avenue. So, you know, the media side always intrigued me too, because when I was younger, I'd always gravitate towards like the broadcast production side of things. When I'm watching either a hockey game on TV or football or baseball, whatever it is, I was always really interested in how the production side works. So as I was getting outside of schooling and getting towards the end of high school, I should say, I did reach out to a local radio station where I grew up in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. And in Nanaimo, I approached the local radio station about just trying to do some interning, kind of like a summer student type position where I could go in and kind of learn the ropes. And one thing led to another, and I got my foot in the door there, doing various roles over the next couple of years, including getting on air, doing some news and sports inside the radio station's news department. So that was a great experience. And I kind of opened other doors to doing some broadcasting, doing some junior B hockey, doing some junior football on the island as well. And just like an athlete, to get better at all this stuff, it's all about repetition, reps, and practice. So then, I just started kind of getting my foot in the door, and slowly kind of built, a bit of a portfolio doing that stuff. And then from there, it kind of took off, where I got an opportunity to go work outside of the province in Saskatchewan. I was only 20 years old. Started working out in Saskatchewan, doing some junior A broadcasting at the radio station there that covered several cities, because they're all small communities close together. And where I was living in Melfort, we got to do news and sports and do some play-by-play of various local sports. But it was a long road after that, with stops in junior hockey, as we're going to probably talk about on the podcast today. But it all started with just kind of an inkling, kind of curiosity in Nanaimo when I wanted to stay in sports. I knew that was probably some sort of career path for me, but just inside sports, what was the career path going to be? And I thought, okay, I think broadcasting is what I want to do. I like kind of talking about broadcasting. I liked listening to like sports talk on radio or TV. So I just kind of put my foot in the door with the local radio station and kept kind of working and taking opportunities. And one thing led to another. And now I'm 32 years old, working in Prince George.
Yeah. So did you have a favorite broadcaster growing up? Like, was there that one person that you're like, that's who I want to be like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most broadcasters do have someone immediately look up to as someone they try to take after, or take things from their skill set and try to apply it to their own. Growing up in Nanaimo, we got to see a lot of Vancouver Canucks, obviously, and Toronto Blue Jays on TV, and Seattle Seahawks. There's a couple people I kind of immediately gravitated towards. Growing up, one was towards the end of his career was Jim Robson, the late great Canucks broadcaster. Enjoying retirement now, but longtime voice of Canucks either on TV or radio. Jim Houston was another one. When I was younger, was still doing local Canuck games. John Shorthouse, those types of people. Someone I really liked as well. And then like in baseball side of things, I really like Dan Chauvin, who's kind of serendipitously back as the Blue Jays broadcaster now on Sportsnet, but a great broadcaster, not just in baseball, but he's done football, he's done basketball, very well versed as well. So, when I was growing up, just being in Nanaimo, you get a lot of Vancouver type of content when it comes to sports. So, a lot of Canuck broadcasters over the years kind of helped me pick things up. And then obviously there's a lot of standouts that everybody talks about, on CBC, listening to Bob Cole or guys like Chris Cuthbert as well on Saturday nights, great broadcasters. So those guys you like to pick things up from. And there's some obscure ones too, like in other sports, Seattle Seahawks, their broadcaster, Steve Rabel. Interesting, side note with him, he's actually a former player, one of the very few former players in the NFL that's gravitated to become a play-by-play broadcaster, but he's a longtime voice of the Seattle Seahawks. And me being a big Seahawks fan, I listen to a lot of Seahawks broadcasts, so Steve Rabel will be one that stands out. But a lot of Vancouver people as well. Nothing in particular, one broadcaster, but several for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what was your experience like as a play-by-play broadcaster for Penticton in the run to the RBC Cup?
That was, my first year in 2012 when they won the national championship. So very green still, very wide-eyed, I'd say, learning the ropes. But I fell into, a great situation there, Noah, with, Fred Harbinson, the way he built that team with so much talent, future NHL players and Troy Stetcher and Mike Riley. List goes on and on too. Guys that have gone on to play professional hockey on that team. But I was working actually the summer prior. I was working in the BCHL with another team in Powell River, and that off season, I got a call from Penticton. The job had opened up, and I was actually working a landscaping job in the summer just to kind of make ends meet as a young broadcaster. So I remember taking that call in someone's garden bed in the front yard on a sunny day, and it was, Penticton management, Fred Harbinson, phoning saying, would you be interested in applying for this position? And, one thing led to another, and went through the interview process and got that job. And then, it was only my second year in the BCHL, so still very green, like I said. And great team. They had a record-breaking 42-game win streak in the regular season. That was well documented by national media from coast to coast. And then it all was capped off with the memorable RBC Cup championship win, as you just mentioned, that in Humboldt that year. So it was a great team. You're kind of like naive to the situation. You thought, it's going to be like this every year, having these, all-star teams, because you just get into the situation, all of a sudden your team's that good. But no, it was definitely very special. And probably as I got older now and I look back, you reflect on it and you realize how special that was, being a part of that organization during that year.
Yeah, so moving a bit farther down your experience with Penticton, in 2016-17, you won the BCHL Broadcaster of the Year. So how would you describe that experience? And if you could offer guidance to someone interested in broadcasting, what would you tell them?
Wow, that's a great question. But the experience was kind of bittersweet. It was actually a nice ending to my time at BCHL. I was just stepped down in Penticton just a few weeks prior, vacating that position. Just thought it was time for me to explore some new opportunities. I had been in Penticton for 7 years at that point, and I thought, life can change for someone, and it did for me. I met my future wife at the time. I met her. She was living in Kelowna, and I was looking to move there and kind of start a life there. And then I did, randomly, it's funny, on a random day, get the call from the BCHL saying, you've been named the Broadcaster of the Year. And that was very humbling because it is voted on by your peers, the fellow BCHL broadcasters.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Vote that award. So it's nice to know that your peers and some of your good friends, hold you in high regard. Especially, leaving that league after being in that league for 8 years, 7 of which were in Penticton. And that was a nice kind of, topping on the cake, the cherry on top, if you will, of my time in the BCHL. And I didn't really know what my next step was. A lot of people thought, you must have been going to Prince George right away. And it's like, no, that's not the case at all. I actually was just leaving broadcasting at that time to, reevaluate my next step in life. And then obviously that award came out of the blue, and that was a really nice honor. And then to answer the second part of your question, advice-wise, that's a really good question. Someone trying to get into broadcasting, what's the biggest piece of advice I'd give? It's tough to narrow it down to one statement, but I'd probably just say, if you really want to make it work, you really have to be dedicated. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, peaks and valleys trying to become a broadcaster. You don't get into it for the money. There's no financial windfall in broadcasting, especially at a young age. A lot of it is going to be very low paying or even volunteer at the start. And my biggest probably piece of advice is if you really want it, if you're, that hungry to be a broadcaster, you just have to really work your tail off and be really dedicated to the craft. Do your homework. It's one thing I've told a lot of young people too, is do your homework on any subject. If you're interviewing someone, if you're broadcasting a certain sport, make sure you're well-read, well-researched on the team or teams or the person you may be interviewing, if you're launching a podcast like this. And going back to my first point, just be really dedicated. Make sure you really want it, put the work in, because hard work does pay off in this industry.
Yeah, that's great for sure. Yeah, so you kind of alluded to this. You didn't go right to the Cougars after you were with Penticton. So that actually was my next question is so what led you to go to the Cougars?
Yeah, so I was out of broadcasting probably for, I think, 7 whole weeks. My retirement lasted. I thought I was moving on to something outside of broadcasting. At the time, actually, I was working in Kelowna for a friend's company. I just starting out doing some work, a job that he offered me just to, get my feet wet and get back into the working force and pay the bills at the time being. But I was actually on a vacation, a summer holiday at Shuswap Lake, which is not far from Kelowna. Fortunately, my family has a summer cabin there for several years, and I was actually out there on August long weekend at the time of 2017. Yeah, so almost 3 years ago to the week probably as we're talking right now.
Yeah.
And I got a call out of the blue actually from Dan O'Connor, who at the time was the Prince George Cougars broadcaster, now works for the Vancouver Giants, and he was the Cougars broadcaster for several seasons up until that point. And I remember the cell service is not very good at the cabin on Shuswap Lake. It's a remote area, so I don't really have my cell phone on me throughout the day. You're out on the boat or you're out on the beach, so you don't really have your cell phone with you. So I actually went back to the cabin that night for dinner after a day of boating and hanging out with family and friends on the beach, and I saw this missed call and a voicemail from Dan. And I thought, oh, that's kind of strange of the blue, Dan to call, on August weekend. So I had to actually get on a bike and bike down this country road to get better service and return Dan's call. And, Dan just started off by, asking me how I was doing, how life was in Kelowna. And I said, it's great, starting a new chapter in my life. And then he said, well, do you want to get back into broadcasting? And that did hit me out of left field. I was like, broadcasting? And then he told me he was transitioning to Vancouver in a couple of weeks to become the Giants broadcaster, and they needed someone in Prince George to take over, and he wanted to put my name on a short list. And, I did some humming and hawing. It was funny. It was a time in my life where, I didn't immediately jump at the opportunity like most would, and that's no disrespect to Cougars. It's the fact where I was personally in my life. I didn't know if I wanted to step back in that world of broadcasting. So, after some conversations with my wife and my family, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and get back in the process of applying for it. And then a few steps later, they offered me the position. A couple weeks later, it was a very quick process from some phone interviews to an in-person interview. I met their management in Kelowna for breakfast. And then right after that breakfast on a Sunday morning, they offered me the job. And then a week later, I packed up my car and drove 8 hours north to get there for training camp. And that's the story. It happened kind of out of the blue, but getting back to that last question, about young broadcasters, if you work hard, and really dedicate yourself, sometimes, good things will happen without you, knowing it because of the hard work you put in. So, I put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over the time before getting this job in the WHL, and fortunately got a big break. But I'd like to think it is as, good things happen to, good people and people that, put the work in. So it was kind of, funny that when you're not looking for it, a big break happens in your career, as opposed to looking for it when you're in the industry and not getting that big break. So really fortunate to land here in Prince George.
Yeah, I was going to say you certainly put sweat into getting the job at Prince George. So that bike ride.
Yeah, no kidding. It was comical having to get on a bike and, you know, riding down a country road to answer a cell phone and talk. And it was quite the 2 weeks in my life that August of 2017, just going from someone outside of broadcasting, outside the hockey world, to getting both feet jumping back in the deep end. It was quite the ride.
Yeah, so being with an organization like Penticton that achieved a lot of success, how do you apply that to your current position with the Cougars?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question because a lot of people ask me, Noah, like, how do you handle going from, you know, a team that won so much and had so many accolades and championships and trophies and, you know, high-end players, going from Penticton and going to Prince George, where they're in the middle of a transition time in the organization, rebuilding, getting younger, and, you know, not going to be a dominant team. And I knew that going in where they were. They're coming off, you know, a BC Division championship, and they were looking to restock the cupboards and rebuild through the draft and, you know, build it back up again after taking a run. And I think that's a great question because I think the answer is in the question. I think it's this professionalism and that winning attitude that I kind of learned by looking at the coaching and the management staff in Penticton and kind of taking that with me to Prince George and how I conduct myself. You know, it doesn't matter what the team's doing on the ice. Are you being professional? Are you, you know, carrying yourself to a certain standard no matter what, win or lose? And so that's something I always think about. If there's, you know, a losing streak or times are tough in the rebuild and you're looking at, you know, a tough run of games where there's some losses. And I always remind myself, you know, make sure you're still conducting yourself as if you are the best team in the league and as if you are on the best organization, because that professionalism, that culture that comes from winning starts with your attitude. And it even, you know, relates to the off-ice staff. You talk about players having a good attitude and building a good culture to breed success. It happens on the business side too, to be the most professional person you want to be. And I always say this saying, you know, when it comes to conduct is, you know, act as if you can be the most professional person, but act for the job you want, not the job you have. So if you want to be in the WHL, you know, aspire to that level of professionalism. When you're not working, maybe it's junior A or junior B. And if you're in the WHL, aspire to the professionalism of an NHL standard if you want to get there. And there's a really cheesy saying I always like to say too is dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And I kind of use that in my professional life too. It's just being the most professional I can be.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Actually, I wasn't expecting quite that much. Yeah. So has your role really evolved since you first signed for the Cougars?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a very fluid position in the sense you're always doing something new, something different every year based on just your experience. You know, from more responsibility on social media side of things, or, you know, trying new things when it comes to the broadcasting world. It's not just radio. Getting, as you know, video is a very up and coming, you know, content piece in media, especially digital media, is video content, especially in sports. And for sports teams, video content is king, as they say. So yeah, I think there's several things, you know, you learn and you try to incorporate, and you learn from your colleagues, you learn from other people in the league, your coworkers as well. It's, you know, job sharing ideas, cross-referencing ideas and new angles you can use to cover your team and promote your team. So there's definitely things that, you know, from my first year to now that I've learned to do more of that, you know, little bit of graphic work. Still very new at that. You know, one of our business staff here really takes the lead, but doing a little stuff to supplement his workload. And also the video stuff is definitely a big thing, is getting more video content through our media channels. Either it's through our website or our social media channels, is getting that more behind the scenes access for the team. And definitely on the social media front, just learning more about social media. I think that someone tells you if they're a social media expert, I think they're, telling you a bit of a white lie in the sense, I don't think anybody can master social media because it's always changing. It's a very evolving platform. So learning more and expanding your skill set in social media is something I'm constantly trying to do as well to help promote the team. It all comes back to helping promote the players in the team. That's the biggest thing you want to do working for a junior hockey team is promotion of that team. So there's a lot of things I learned to, help promote the team for sure.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned a bit on the social media. From my understanding, you recently started Cougars TV. So what are your hopes for that platform?
Yeah, I think that's just like we were just talking about, kind of dovetails into this answer too, is just getting more access, more transparency to the organization for the fans. So be more transparency in the sense of knowing what goes on behind the scenes, what are the day-to-day operations like during a season for the hockey team. If it's, how do they, work a game night? How does the CN Center game night experience look like? Or just looking at, practice or coaching and drafting and how it all works. So doing a lot of features, just showing how, hockey organization is run. And I think Cougars TV is something that's still in its infancy and, baby step, just bringing light to the team. You're always trying to get more attention on your product, either if it's fans or the media. And the media are a great tool to have a partnership with and use because they help promote your product by reporting on your product. So Cougars TV is an easy way to help give content as well to local media members here in Prince George, doing some features. They can use that on their local reports or TV broadcasts or the radio station interviews and content as well. So I think Cougars TV is something that we love to keep expanding and make it a bigger and better project, but that will take time, obviously. But it's something that we just talked about. Video content is king. It seems like on social media, that's what people want to watch. There's a lot of short, interesting, engaging videos. It's not even long videos. It's short, engaging content, 30 to 90 seconds. So I hope it becomes something that, people go to when they look at our website or they look at YouTube or if they look at our social media channels is what's going on Cougars TV.
Yeah, so you kind of already talked about this as well, but the Cougars have struggled a little bit over the last few years, right? And how do you approach rebuilding public interest in the team, so that we can get back to the rock and barn that we that we had back in the day when we used to be rated the most the most terrifying barn for the league? How do you get back to that?
That's a great question. I think that's a question we ask ourselves, daily, internally as a staff. How do we, build up the interest to a point where we can become, a great place for, fans and atmospheres. You mentioned this building, the CN Center, in the late '90s and early 2000s, was one of the most intimidating places for the visiting teams to come to. It was always voted by other coaches and players in the league is one of the most toughest places to play. And I think that it goes hand in hand with the on-ice product too, Noah, that, there has to be, it's not lie here. We can say there has to be, a competitive winning team to help generate interest because the biggest marketing tool you have is winning. That does cure anything.
Yeah.
If, you're trying to get more fans or more eyeballs on your product, winning certainly helps. And playoff wins and winning championships, that's going to give you so much exposure. But if a team as Prince George has been and will be for a year or two more, transitioning into a rebuilding development phase, you have to find new and creative alternatives to keep fans engaged and interested in your product. So it comes down to our excellent operations staff here. Ian Scott, our business director of business and on game operations, him and his team do a great job of keeping the fans entertained at a game. And you have to have an entertaining product at the CN Center. When someone walks through the door, they have to be entertained. They have to be engaged. They have to be wowed. Everybody has cell phones. These things are the biggest distraction for anybody. And it's the hardest thing for us to combat in the entertainment industry is the cell phone, because the cell phone has everything that anybody wants at their fingertips. So how do you get someone off their cell phone or off their couch and stay engaged with your That means you have to be entertaining. So when it comes to music at the games, maybe it's the video scoreboard entertainment, the intermission promotions, maybe it's the food and beverage deals, merchandise, contesting, list goes on and on. So the long answer to this question would be keeping the product, the game night product, entertaining. So when people come to games, they're having a great time. Even though the Cougars may not win that game, people are sitting in their seats and they're getting that value from the ticket they bought, knowing that they had a great time, they had some good food, they had some good drinks, they had some great laughs, they enjoyed the content, they laughed at the intermission promos, or had a really good fun time watching some of the Jumbotron engagement as well.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, actually, because I know also, like you kind of talked about with Cougars TV and stuff, is bring more attention to the players. Like in the last 2 drafts, the Cougars have really got a really solid stockpile of good young players. I know Riley Height, it's really easy to really hype him up. So as you're trying to really build up that social media following, obviously I was actually looked at the social media followings for like the Cougars and the Spruce Kings this week, and I was surprised by how large it actually was. Do you really hope to use that to really try to hype up some of these young players, to really, even if the fans don't necessarily see the results immediately, that they can be like, oh, that player's going to be there, I actually want to see them play?
Yeah, that's a great point you just made. You definitely need to have a good social media presence, because winning and marketing go hand in hand. They really do. To properly market a team, you have to win, but to properly market your winning team, you have to have a good marketing strategy to create a great product that puts bums in the seats, to create that great atmosphere you talked about you want to see at the CN Center. So a great example, Riley Height. He's going to be an exceptional talent in the WHL. I know it's lofty praise, but you can pull a lot of WHL scouts or media members that follow the league, or hockey prospect writers, and they say how talented he is. So we'll take him as an example. You do have to have a good, you do have to do an excellent marketing strategy or social media presence to properly market a player, because you want to show off that player, expose them to new fans to get those people coming in. You want things to go viral. Everything's viral in 2020, isn't it, Noah?
Yeah.
So what you want is a moment, maybe it's his first WHL goal, or maybe Riley Height, goes end to end one night and scores an unbelievable goal. Well, that is a way to market your team, because not only are you marketing Riley Height, for the future NHL draft or whatever it may be, but you're also marketing your product. You want come see Riley Height because you'll see more of this, and maybe it's a video clip of them doing something. And that's the way someone's sitting on their couch at home, flipping through their phone, and they go, whoa, look at this, Riley Height. We got to go see him next game. They're sitting there and they see it on Twitter. And that's what you want. You want someone to go on Instagram or go on Facebook and Twitter. They see a great highlight of a Riley Height goal, or maybe it's a Taylor Gauthier save, or, this year, Cohen Zimmer, Keaton Delheniak, 2 young prospects for us that will probably be in the team, make an exceptional play. That's how you get people to come to your games, but also that's how you promote the players at the same time. And, it goes hand in hand, as I mentioned. So, Riley Height's a good example. To properly promote him, you have to have a really good social media presence, but also you have to have him do some exceptional things for you as well, and I'm sure he will. And that's what we're excited about, is having this young core, showing them off through all our social media channels, and that in turn hopefully sells more tickets and gets people to come to the games, and everybody can be happy that way, because the team is getting the support they need, the fans are getting entertained, and the players are getting the exposure they want as well to hopefully get drafted one day.
Yeah, that's I know it's always interesting, right? Like when you look at, you need to have, right, you want people to come and see a great player, but then that player to then get bigger so that more people want to come, you need those first people to come, right? It's like it kind of just keeps going in a circle.
Right. It's kind of like 100%. It's like the chicken or the egg? What came first, right? So you have to have the good players to have a good product, and definitely Mark Lamb, the GM and head coach, and Bob Simmons, director of scouting, a couple guests already on your guys' podcast.
Yeah.
I've done a really good job in the last couple of years to build this foundation that should be ready in a couple of years' time. And hopefully we have these moments where we can really showcase the players. Fans get excited about the team. The building's full. Social media is doing a great job of exposing these players to our fans, and that will create hopefully a great atmosphere here at the CN Center.
Yeah, so kind of going away from that a bit, I guess, is so as the manager of public relations, like what is your role in the Cougars community involvement, for example, with the Salvation Army Kettle campaign and with going to different schools and like playing against the kids there? Like what do you actually do with that?
Yeah, that's one of my main roles, like throughout the week, if there's no hockey going on, you're not just getting ready for games. I'm not doing that on the media side. That's one of the big roles, is getting the team out in the community, because we want to be, even though we're not a publicly owned team, we have private ownership, but it's local private ownership, but we want this team to feel like it's owned by the community. That's their team. We're out there, they support us, so we'll be out there supporting them. So one of my bigger roles throughout the year is booking community events. So that's talking with several different community groups. You mentioned Salvation Army. Bill Glasgow and his team there, they do a great job with so many different things throughout the year. We love the partnership with them, but there's also really good organizations in town as well. Maybe it's doing something with Big Brothers Big Sisters, or Special Olympics Prince George. We have a really good relationship with them. Lisa Flood and her team, they're fantastic. Our players love playing floor hockey with the Special Olympic team. That's very competitive. Yeah. Boy, does that get really competitive. Like the Special Olympic athletes, they're very good at floor hockey. They travel and they do their tournaments. And the Cougars, they're very prideful and competitive. So that gets a lot of fun. That's a really good community outreach program. There's so many other fundraisers we like to help as well, because we want us to be the community's team. So it keeps me busy. I'm, booking events, in contact with these coordinators to make sure we're at these events, we're properly supporting the community in the way we can do, and that's having our players and staff out there and helping raise awareness for whatever campaign it may be on their side of things. So for me, it's busy. I'm on the phone, you're answering emails, you're booking events throughout the year, trying to keep the team engaged with the community, because you just don't want this team sitting behind closed doors with really no public access outside of the CN Center games. You want to make sure these fans not only see a Riley Heights score a goal, but they want to see him maybe, at a Kettle campaign, at the Tim Hortons, drive-through raising money, and that's where they can go up and talk to him and engage him as a person. 'Cause that's the biggest thing in junior hockey. It's a challenge to get your players connected with the fan base outside of the rink, because they're wearing helmets, they're wearing gear, they don't have that intimate interaction. So that intimate interaction happens at public events, and that's the great. It's playing with kids, signing autographs, taking pictures, or just flapping gums with fans about the game. That's what you want with your players. So yeah, public relations is a huge part of our season and our philosophy here, and it keeps you busy.
Yeah, so I guess this is the last thing. Where do you hope to go from here personally? Do you see yourself being in the WHL for the long haul, or do you eventually hope to move up to like an NHL team?
That's a good question. Maybe 3 years ago, I'd probably say, yeah, the next step, like a hockey player for a broadcaster, is professional hockey. So maybe the NHL or the American League. But I've really grown some roots here, Noah, in Prince George. I know a lot of people say they're never from Prince George, but they end up staying anyways. It has that charm.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a saying. I've seen lots of that happen to a lot of people. So
yeah, you move here maybe for work or for school or whatever, and then you fall in love with Prince George. I think Prince George has got this very sneaky charm to it, that northern BC charm to it. And maybe 3 years ago, I would have said, no, yeah, I want to get in the NHL and, bang on that door. And don't get me wrong, a professional opportunity would come. I would love to have an opportunity to explore it, but I'm very happy where I am in Prince George. And hopefully I'm here for several years calling Cougars hockey. You know, my wife and I got married in 2018. Our daughter was born in 2019 here in Prince George at, you know, UNHBC Hospital. So, you know, we have roots here, and we have, you know, bought a house as well. So I've really made Prince George. So I don't know if the next step isn't a step. If the next step is staying here and raising a family, I think I'd be really happy. My wife, she's a nurse, works in the medical field, and she really loves her job here and loves working in Prince George and working with people. And, you know, I love my job here, working with an incredible staff and getting to call hockey games for a living. And, you know, I like watching my daughter grow up right now. She's a year and a half old, and love to see her, you know, grow up in Prince George. But, you know, if hockey takes me somewhere else, so be it. But, you know, if it doesn't, and if this is my last stop in broadcasting, I couldn't be happier to have this as a place I put some roots in, because I love it up here. So we'll see. I don't know what the next step is, but for now, I'm really happy in Prince George, and hopefully I get to see, you know, a couple of championship runs in the next few years with this young core coming up, as we talked about throughout this podcast today. I love nothing other to call some playoff hockey at the CN Center again, and call hopefully one day a championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So once again, thank you, Fraser, for joining me on the podcast today. It was great to have you. Great conversation. I know we've actually really started to talk a bit more, not just through Tyler. So that's been good too. Yeah. Just thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And, you know, congrats to you and Tyler on the start of the podcast. I know it's got some great reviews already. You guys have some great guests, and unfortunately you're going to lose some listeners probably having to listen to me blab on this episode. I apologize in advance. Hopefully your next guest will be a lot better than me, but good luck with the podcast, guys. It's been a great listen, and all the best in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Have a nice day.
You too.
Yeah. Bye.
And that concludes today's episode of the RinkMasters podcast, where we do hockey Northern style. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you all next week.